I built my empire on the principle that nothing escapes my notice. Every detail matters. Every person is cataloged, assessed, deemed useful or irrelevant within seconds. It's kept me alive for 10 years in a business where most men don't survive 5. So I can tell you exactly when Adaeze Okonkwo became the exception to every rule I'd built my life around. October 17th, 11:47 p.m. I was working late in my office on the 42nd floor, reviewing acquisition reports for a shipping company we were using to move product through Busan. The numbers weren't adding up, which meant someone was either incompetent or stealing. Either way, they'd be dealt with by morning. The soft click of my office door opening made me look up, irritated. I told security no interruptions. But it wasn't security. A woman stood in the doorway, frozen with her hand still on the handle. She wore the navy uniform of our cleaning staff, a detail I'd approved the design for but never actually noticed on a person before. Natural black hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Warm brown skin that seemed to glow even under harsh office lighting. No makeup. Exhaustion carved into the delicate lines of her face. She looked terrified. "I'm so sorry," she stammered in heavily accented Korean, the English influence clear in her pronunciation. "I didn't know anyone was still here. I'll come back later. I'm sorry, It's fine." The words came out harsher than intended. I was annoyed at the interruption, not her specifically. "Do what you need to do." She hesitated, clearly wanting to flee but unable to disobey a direct instruction. I watched her war with herself for 3 seconds before training one out. She entered the office with the posture of someone expecting to be yelled at, keeping her eyes down, moving with practiced silence. I turned back to my reports, dismissing her from my thoughts. "We're trying to," she hummed while she worked, quietly, under her breath, probably not even aware she was doing it. Some melody I didn't recognize, definitely not Korean, the rhythm distinctly African. Soft and slightly melancholic. It shouldn't have been distracting. My office was soundproof to the point where I couldn't hear Seoul's traffic 42 floors below. But somehow that humming cut through my concentration like a blade. I found myself tracking her movements peripherally. She wasn't just cleaning, she was organizing. Straightening books I'd left scattered on the side table. Adjusting the angle of the sculpture someone had given me that I'd never looked at twice. Watering the plants I'd forgotten I owned. 20 minutes later, she finished. Bowed slightly in my direction without making eye contact. The gesture awkward, like she'd learned Korean customs but hadn't quite internalized them. Left without another word. I stared at the closed door for a full minute, annoyed at myself for noticing her departure. Then I went back to work and forgot she existed. Or I told myself I did. She came back the next night. And the night after that. Always late. Always when the building was mostly empty. Always moving through my space like a ghost who'd learned to be invisible. I started noticing patterns. She worked 3 jobs. I discovered this by accident when Minsik mentioned the overnight cleaning crew complained about one woman taking every available shift, even the ones no one wanted. The late nights. The holidays. The emergency calls when someone didn't show. Adaeze Okonkwo. That was her name. According to employee records I had no business reviewing. 26 years old. Nigerian passport. Student visa that had transitioned to a work visa 2 years ago. No criminal record. Emergency contact listed as Okonkwo Chioma, sister. Previous employment at 2 other cleaning companies, 3 restaurants, and a convenience store. She'd been churning through jobs for years, never staying anywhere long enough to build seniority. I told myself I was doing routine security checks. That's what I told myself when I pulled her file a second time. And a third. The truth was more complicated. She alphabetized my books. I noticed this in November, 2 months after that first encounter. I kept a collection in my office, mostly architecture texts from my university days before my father died, and left me a criminal empire instead of the architectural firm I'd planned to join. They'd sat in random order for years, accumulating dust, representing a future I'd buried. But one night I reached for a specific title and found it exactly where it should be. Arranged by author, then by publication date within each author. Someone had spent considerable time organizing hundreds of books I never touched. No one had asked her to do this. It wasn't in her job description. She'd simply seen disorder and corrected it. I found myself wondering what kind of person did that. What kind of mind saw alphabetization as necessary in a criminal's office? December brought the plants. I'd had them installed when the interior designer insisted the office needed life and warmth. I'd agreed because I didn't care, and she was expensive enough to presumably know what she was doing. The plants existed. I never watered them, never even looked at them. But suddenly they were thriving. Deep green leaves, new growth, one of them actually flowering in winter. Impossible without care. I checked the security footage from my office, something I rarely did since I trusted my own security more than cameras. But I scrolled back through weeks of overnight recordings until I found her. Every Thursday night, she watered the plants, checked the soil moisture with her fingers, removed dead leaves, rotated them toward the window, spoke to them in soft Igbo. At least that's what it sounded like, though I couldn't understand the words. Her lips moved in what seemed like conversation, maybe prayer. She cared for things that didn't belong to her, that no one had asked her to care for. I watched that footage 3 times before I realized what I was doing and closed the window, disgusted with myself. I started timing my late nights to coincide with her shifts. Not consciously at first, but somehow my work that could be done at any hour consistently needed my attention between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m., exactly when she cleaned the executive floor. I told myself it was coincidence, that I worked late because I had work to do, not because I wanted to hear her humming through my closed office door. But I started leaving my door slightly ajar, just enough that sound could travel. She had different songs for different moods. Upbeat rhythms when she was energized, Afrobeats, I eventually learned, after researching Nigerian music. Slow melodies when she was exhausted. Sometimes she sang actual words in languages I couldn't identify. Igbo, Yoruba, maybe English with an accent so thick I couldn't parse it. Her voice was soft, but surprisingly lovely, pitch-perfect control. I found myself researching Nigerian music, learning about the culture she came from, discovering that many of the songs she hummed were about struggle, about hoping for better days, about being far from home. It painted a picture I didn't want to care about. January brought the incident that made me realize I was in trouble. I was in a meeting on the 38th floor, negotiating a territory agreement with a syndicate from Incheon who'd been encroaching on our shipping routes. Tense conversation. Violence implied, but not stated. The kind of meeting where one wrong word could start a war. And I couldn't concentrate, because I knew she was 4 floors above me, cleaning my office, and I wanted to be there instead of here. Wanted to watch her organize things that didn't need organizing. Wanted to hear her hum songs about home while making my space somehow more livable. Mr. Kang, the Incheon boss, was staring at me. Do we have an agreement? I forced my attention back. We do. On the terms discussed. Minsik will handle the details. I left the meeting early, taking the elevator to 42, walking into my office just as she was finishing. She startled when she saw me, nearly dropping the book she was reshelving. Mr. Kang, I'm sorry, I'll get out of your way. You alphabetized these. I gestured at the books. Why? She looked confused, frightened, like I was angry. Her accent was thick when she was nervous, I noticed. I'm sorry, should I not? I thought it would make them easier to find, but if you prefer them another way. I prefer them this way. I moved closer, watching her tense. I'm asking why you spent time on something no one asked you to do. Oh, she relaxed fractionally. Her hands twisted together, a nervous habit. When I see books out of order, it bothers me. And they're beautiful books. Architecture, right? They deserve to be organized properly. Respected. She'd noticed. Not just that they existed, but what they were. What they represented. You like architecture? I asked. I don't know much about it, she admitted. But the drawings in some of these books are incredible. The way buildings can be both functional and beautiful. It seems like magic. She paused, then added quietly. In Lagos, where I'm from, there are buildings like this. Colonial architecture mixed with modern. Chaotic, but beautiful. Something in my chest tightened. This woman who cleaned floors for minimum wage, who worked 3 jobs, who was drowning in exhaustion I could see in every line of her face, who was thousands of miles from home. She looked at architectural drawings and saw magic. Saw connections to the place she'd left behind. Have you ever wanted to study it? The question came out before I could stop it. Her smile was sad. I wanted to study a lot of things, but life had different plans. She gestured at her uniform. I came to Korea for university, engineering, but my mother got sick back home. The money had to go there instead of tuition. By the time she stopped, swallowed. By the time she died, I'd already dropped out. Couldn't get back in. So now I clean beautiful buildings instead of designing them. It's fine though. I get to see them every day. She left after that, and I stood in my office surrounded by alphabetized books and thriving plants, feeling something I hadn't felt in 10 years. Interest. In a person, not a transaction. In a woman, not an asset. I was 35 years old. I'd built an empire on emotional detachment. Had relationships that were transactional, physical, temporary by design. Love was a weakness I couldn't afford. Connection was a vulnerability enemies exploited. But Adaeze Okonkwo had somehow bypassed every defense I'd built, and I had no idea what to do about it. I tried to stop. In February, I implemented new policies, assigned different cleaning staff to the executive floor, scheduled my late nights for different days, threw myself into expansion plans that required my full attention. It worked for exactly 5 days. Then I was reviewing security footage for an unrelated incident and saw her cleaning the 34th floor instead of my office. Saw her moving with the same care, the same attention to detail. Saw her stop to help another cleaner who'd spilled something, getting on her hands and knees to help clean up a mess that wasn't her responsibility. Heard her speak in accented Korean, patient and kind, to a woman who clearly appreciated the help. I changed the policy back. Executive floor needed consistent staff for security purposes, I told my operations manager. She was already cleared, already familiar with the space. It made logical sense. He didn't question it. No one questioned me. But I knew the truth. I wanted her back. She returned to my office on a Thursday night. I was there, pretending to work, actually listening for her arrival. Mr. Kang. She seemed surprised to see me, like she'd expected my absence. Her English-influenced Korean was soft, careful. I thought you changed your schedule. Changed it back. I didn't elaborate. You water the plants on Thursdays. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes, they need consistent care. Once a week is enough for most of them, though the orchid needs more attention. She moved to the plants, her graceful hands already reaching for the watering can. My mother taught me. She said plants are like people. They show you what they need if you pay attention. Your mother, I said. You mentioned she got sick. She died 2 years ago. Cancer. Adaeze's voice was steady, but her hands stilled on the orchid. We couldn't afford the treatment she needed. Healthcare in Nigeria is difficult, expensive. By the time we'd saved enough to bring her here, it was too late. Medical debt. International medical debt, even worse. That's what drove her to work 3 jobs, to take every shift, to run herself into exhaustion thousands of miles from home. Not extravagance, not ambition. Survival and debt service and guilt for not being able to save her mother. I'm sorry, I said and meant it. She turned to look at me then, really look at me, like she was seeing me as a person instead of an employer. Her dark eyes held something like surprise. Thank you. That's kind of you to say. Most people here don't ask about. She gestured vaguely. About home. About before. I think they find it uncomfortable. We held eye contact for 3 seconds too long. I saw the moment she realized it, saw color rise in her warm brown skin before she turned back to the plants. I wanted to ask more questions. Wanted to know everything. What Lagos was like. Whether she missed home. What she dreamed about in whatever few hours she slept. Why she came to a country where people found her existence uncomfortable. Instead, I said, the books are holding up well. Your organization system. Oh, good. She smiled, small but genuine. I'm glad it's helpful. After she left, I sat in my office and admitted what I'd been avoiding for months. I was falling for my cleaning girl. A woman who was so far removed from my world we might as well exist in different dimensions. A woman who worked 3 jobs while I controlled an empire worth billions. A woman who cared about alphabetizing books and watering plants while I orchestrated violence and intimidation for a living. A woman who was thousands of miles from home, working herself to death to pay off debt for a mother she couldn't save. It was impossible, inappropriate, crossed every professional boundary that existed. And I didn't care. March brought clarity in the worst possible way. I'd been monitoring Choi Daesung's movements for months. The Choi Syndicate had been testing boundaries, pushing into territory I controlled, making aggressive moves that suggested they thought I was weakening. They were wrong, but their persistence was problematic. Eventually, I'd need to respond, make an example, remind Seoul's underworld why they feared the Kang name. I just hadn't expected them to hand me justification in the form of Adaeze's safety. Minsik reported it first. Sir, the Choi enforcers have been watching our building, taking photos, following some of the staff. Which staff? Lower level. Cleaning crew, security guards. People they think are invisible. He paused. The Nigerian woman, Okonkwo Adaeze, has been photographed 17 times in the past 2 weeks. Everything in me went cold. Show me. The surveillance photos were damning. Adaeze leaving the building at 2 a.m., getting into her car, driving to her second job. They'd mapped her entire routine, identified her as someone connected to me, marked her as a potential target. Why her specifically? I kept my voice level, even though rage was building in my chest. She's the only cleaning staff who works your floor regularly. They think she might have access to information. Or, Minsik hesitated. Some of the photos show her leaving your office. They might think she's more than just cleaning staff. And sir, she stands out. Foreign worker. They probably think she's vulnerable. Easy target. She wasn't easy, but she was vulnerable in ways that had nothing to do with strength. Foreign. Isolated. Working multiple jobs. No family here except a sister. Perfect target for people wanting to send me a message. And now she was in danger because of proximity to me she hadn't chosen. Increase her security detail, I ordered. Subtle. She shouldn't know she's being watched, but I want eyes on her every moment she's outside this building. Understood. Minsik turned to leave, then paused. Sir, if I may, the level of protection you're assigning is usually reserved for family members. People will notice. They'll ask questions about why a cleaning woman matters this much, especially a foreign one. Let them ask. I met his eyes. And if anyone fails to keep her safe, they answer to me personally. He nodded and left. I pulled up the surveillance photos again, studying each one. Adaeze walking to her car, exhaustion evident in her posture even from a distance. Adaeze in the convenience store where she worked mornings, smiling at a customer despite obvious fatigue. Adaeze entering a hospital, likely for a shift in their laundry services based on our employment records. She was everywhere and nowhere. Working herself to death for debt she'd inherited. Moving through Seoul invisible to everyone except the predators who'd identified her as connected to me. I'd spent 8 months watching her, learning her rhythms, falling for her in increments so small I didn't recognize the sum total until it was too late. And now she was in danger because I'd failed to maintain proper distance. The right thing, the logical thing, would be to transfer her to a different building. Remove her from my orbit entirely. Eliminate the connection the Choi Syndicate had identified. But I couldn't. I'd built an empire on ruthless pragmatism, on choosing strategy over sentiment every single time. But the thought of not seeing her again, of not hearing her hum while she worked, of losing the one person who made my office feel like something other than a cage. I couldn't. So instead, I made a different choice. I assigned her the best security I had, mapped every route she took, identified every vulnerability in her routine, and waited for the Choi Syndicate to make their move. Because they would. Men like Choi Dae-sung don't invest in surveillance without planning to use it. When they came for her, I'd be ready. What I didn't anticipate was how their move would change everything. How watching her broken in a hospital bed would shatter the last of my restraint. How paying off her debt and declaring war would stop being about strategy and become about something far more dangerous. Love. I'd fallen in love with my cleaning girl over 8 months of stolen moments and careful observation. And when they hurt her, they made her mine in ways neither of us could take back. The call came at 12:47 a.m. I was in a meeting with my financial advisors, reviewing quarterly earnings from our legitimate businesses. Boring but necessary work that kept authorities from looking too closely at revenue sources they couldn't explain. My phone buzzed. Minsik's name. He knew better than to interrupt unless critical. Excuse me, I told the advisors, stepping into the hallway to answer. What is it? Adaeze has been attacked. His voice was tight with urgency. Parking garage 2 blocks from headquarters. 3 men. They beat her unconscious. Ambulance is en route, but, sir, it's bad. The world tilted. How bad? She's not responding. Heavy bleeding. They're saying possible internal injuries, broken bones. Security footage caught most of it. I was moving before conscious thought, heading for the elevator, the meeting forgotten. Send the footage to my phone. Give me the names of everyone involved. And mobilize our people. I want the entire syndicate on alert. Already done. Sir, the attackers left a message. They told her to tell you the Choi Syndicate owns Gangnam now. Of course they did. This wasn't random violence. This was calculated. A message delivered using the woman they'd identified as matching to me. They'd miscalculated. I reached my car, driver already waiting. University Hospital. Fastest route. The footage came through while we were moving. I watched it 3 times, each viewing stoking rage I hadn't felt in years. Watching her try to talk her way out in accented Korean. Watching her offer to deliver their message. Watching them beat her anyway, vicious and thorough, while she sobbed and begged them to stop. The scarred one grabbed her hair, her natural black hair that she always wore so carefully, twisted her arm until something broke. I could see the exact moment she lost consciousness, her body going limp while they continued their assault. I memorized their faces. Choi Min-sik, Park Juno, Kim Tae-won, low-level enforcers following orders from above. They were dead men. They just didn't know it yet. We reached the hospital 18 minutes after the call. I bypassed the emergency room check-in, heading straight for the trauma bay where Min-sik met me. She's in surgery, he reported. Broken collarbone, 3 fractured ribs, internal bruising, possible concussion. They're stabilizing her now. Her sister. On her way. I sent a car. I found the waiting room. Paced for 2 hours while surgeons worked to repair what the Choi Syndicate had broken. Ran through scenarios for retaliation. Made calls to mobilize resources. Issued orders that would reshape Seoul's underworld before sunrise. But underneath the strategy and the rage was something more primal. Fear. I'd spent 8 months watching her from distance, learning her rhythms, falling for her, while maintaining boundaries I told myself were necessary. I'd assigned her security, monitored threats, convinced myself I could keep her safe through surveillance and strategic positioning. I'd been arrogant, and she'd paid the price. A doctor emerged at 3:15 a.m. Family of Okonkwo Adaeze? I'm her employer. The words tasted wrong. Inadequate. How is she? Stable. The collarbone will require additional surgery to properly set, but we've addressed the immediate trauma. She'll need extensive recovery time, physical therapy, but she should make a full recovery. Relief hit like a physical blow. When can I see her? She's being moved to a private room now. Once she's settled, you can visit briefly. They let me in at 4 a.m. She was unconscious still, face bruised and swollen, her warm brown skin discolored with purple and yellow. Left shoulder immobilized in a complex brace that looked medieval. Monitors beeped steadily, tracking vital signs that confirmed she was alive. I pulled a chair beside her bed and did something I hadn't done in 15 years. I prayed, not to any god I believed in, but to the universe itself, begging for her to be okay, promising things I had no authority to promise, making deals with powers that didn't exist. She woke at 6:30 a.m., eyes fluttering open in confusion before focusing on me. Mr. Kang. Her voice was wrecked, accent even thicker in her pain. What? Why are you here? Because you're mine, I wanted to say. Because 8 months ago you walked into my office and somehow became the most important person in my entire world without ever realizing it. Because the thought of losing you makes me understand why men burn cities down over women. Instead, I said, you were attacked. You work for me. That makes it my responsibility. Her sister arrived minutes later, another Nigerian woman, younger, terrified, and I stepped back, letting them have their moment while I made the calls that would change everything. By noon, I'd paid off every dollar of her medical debt, found the hospital bills from her mother's treatment in Nigeria, the loans she'd taken out, the money owed to relatives back home. Paid it all. By evening, I'd arranged new housing in a secure building. By midnight, 3 Choi Syndicate operations were burning. And when I walked into her hospital room 2 days later and told her she was under my protection, I meant it in ways she couldn't possibly understand yet. I'd spent 8 months falling for her from a distance. Now I was claiming her. Publicly. Irrevocably. The Choi Syndicate had made her my business when they beat her unconscious delivering a message. They'd given me permission to do what I'd been wanting to do for months. Make her mine. People ask me when I knew I loved her. I tell them it was in the hospital, watching her broken and brave, making promises she couldn't afford about hospital bills she didn't owe, speaking in fractured Korean through pain and fear. That's true, but it's not the whole truth. The whole truth is I fell in love in increments. In Thursday night plant watering sessions I watched on security footage, listening to her speak Igbo to orchids. In alphabetized books I never asked her to organize. In soft humming, Afrobeats and Nigerian hymns that cut through my concentration and made me want to hear more. I fell in love with a woman who cared for things that didn't belong to her, who treated my forgotten plants like they mattered, who saw beauty in architectural drawings while drowning in debt and exhaustion thousands of miles from home, who spoke of Lagos with longing in her voice and organized Korean books with hands that remembered her mother's gardens. I fell in love watching her be invisible to everyone else while becoming the most visible part of my entire life. The attack didn't create my obsession. It freed it. Gave me justification to do what I'd been holding back from for months. Claim her. Protect her. Make her mine in ways that defied every professional boundary I'd sworn to maintain. Adaeze thinks I saved her. The truth is simpler and more complicated. She saved me first. Walked into my office 8 months before that parking garage and reminded me I was still capable of feeling something beyond strategic calculation. The violence just gave me permission to act on what I'd been feeling all along. Now she wears my ring, sleeps in my bed, carries my name, though she kept Okonkwo as her middle name, a compromise that makes her smile. And sometimes, late at night when she thinks I'm asleep, she still hums those melancholic songs about home, about hoping for better days. Except now the days are better. Now she's mine, and I'm hers. Exactly like I planned from the moment she alphabetized my books and made me realize that invisible women can become the center of your entire world. If you loved seeing inside Kang's obsession, hit that like button and subscribe because we have more stories that'll show you what love looks like from the other side. Drop a comment. Do you prefer Adaeze's innocent perspective or Kang's calculated obsession? And stick around because this love story isn't finished yet. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous love affairs start with someone noticing you when you think you're invisible.